me to come and speak to you all today in Executive Club. So really honoured to be here. So I run targeted deaf awareness courses and training for businesses and organisations and individuals across the UK. So we are Study Sharpe. So it's all about Deaf Lives Matters, pardon the expression, but we're all about making sure that deaf people have equal access to employment and to a deaf-friendly workplace. So just to go through some statistics with you that might be slightly illuminating, perhaps. 68% or 2/3 of employees have a hearing loss, feel isolated in their workplace at present. So that could be at home with home working or actually at their workplace because of their hearing loss, and mainly because they've not been given the support or the accessibility tools to be included to be able to do their jobs effectively. So they basically feel ostracized, isolated. Excuse me. So 35% of business owners don't feel confident about employing a deaf person or someone with a hearing loss. And why is that? Possibly and generally it's to do with financial outlay. So employers worry about, if they're going to employ somebody with a hearing loss, how much it's going to cost them. And that's a misconception that at Study Sharpe we try and break down by explaining to you the options available, and that it doesn't have to cost you a large financial outlay to employ a deaf person. So more than 40% of people over the age of 50 have a hearing loss at present. So again, that's a large part of the workforce in the UK. So I guess my point here is that at some point, you as business owners, if you have staff or not, you are going to come into contact with, or have maybe done already, come into contact with a person, applicant, client, customer that has a hearing loss, that may or may not lip read, that may need sort of minor adjustments to your processes in terms of how you actually deal with them. So, bear with me. So some more statistics. I think the most important one I wanted to share is that 1 in 6 of us currently have a form of hearing loss. So if you do the maths, in this room alone, in this virtual meeting, there will be people in this room that may or may not know that they have a form of hearing loss. It may be mild, it might be moderate, it might be profound or severe. But there are going to be people in this meeting that either lip read or lip read a little bit, may not be completely aware that they do that, but there will be people in the room that have a hearing loss of some kind. So that, again, I think is quite sobering, because that means that's how many people there are. So, you know, I think that's important to think about. So by 2035, the statistics are that there'll be around 14.2 million of us with hearing loss across the UK. And there's lots of different reasons for that. If you look potentially at the younger generation, young people, and how they actually affect their hearing by listening, prolonged listening to loud music on their devices, on their iPhones, their iPods, or their, you know, whatever they're called, the headphones for Apple phones, can't remember right now. You know, constantly listening to loud music can damage your hearing long term. But of course, you know, I'm sure as we were all young at one time, we didn't really think into the future, so we didn't really care about that. But long term, those young people going into adulthood in later life will have some form of hearing loss if they are listening to prolonged loud noise now. And that's, again, that's fact, that's going to happen. So that's why that's quite a few, that statistic is there really. So an estimated 900,000 people in the UK have a severe or profound, we call it, hearing loss. So that's a very much more, not debilitating, but has much more of an impact on people's lives when they have very little hearing. So those people, that bracket of people, will be people that do lip read, that may or may not sign, and will have potentially assistive technology, be that hearing aids or cochlear implants. So deafness is an invisible sensory loss. And what I mean by that is that we don't always know if somebody's deaf. You can't always tell physically by looking at them that they do have a hearing loss, because often some people don't always have hearing aids or visible hearing aids or cochlear implants, or if they do, they're so small now, the digital ones, that you can hide them with your hair. And some people don't actually want people to know that they have a hearing loss. So we call it an invisible sensory loss. So we have to make sure that we don't make assumptions about people. And that's why in this digital age and this lockdown pandemic we're in right now, where Zoom and other online platforms, where we're holding our business meetings in this way, we have to try and make sure that we actually accommodate that one person in the meeting that might need captions. As you've seen with my presentation, we're using captions today. That's a simple, easy, inexpensive way of providing accessibility to those people with a hearing loss who may find it difficult to follow in a meeting. Other hints and tips are things like making sure, like Nicole did today, that we all speak one at a time, so that if somebody's lip reading, they can actually follow what's going on and they can actually read that person's lips, because you can only lip read one pair of lips at a time, basically. So it's not rocket science. The other thing is, if you're thinking about your actual accessibility as a business owner, maybe we need to think about our paperwork in terms of, is it accessible to a deaf person? Now, I'm not saying that all deaf people might have low literacy levels, but a lot of deaf people's education is behind, or was behind, their hearing counterparts, partly to teaching methods, or actually missing information during their learning in their school life. And so often they don't find reading English and reading jargon particularly very easy. So what you can do is simplify your documentation, simplify your paperwork in simplified language, so that it makes it more accessible to those people. Also, bullet pointing things can help as well. Okay, so study Sharpe. What do we offer? Who are we? What do we offer? So as I said, we tailor our courses. Our courses are very bespoke, because we like to look at the organisation or business and see what their service needs are. And then we tailor our courses, deaf awareness courses, to that, to meet that. So every organisation business course we do, we write from scratch to try and meet their individual needs. So, for example, if you have a team or some employees and you are in the front line dealing with the public, then maybe you need to think about teaching your staff some basic sign language phrases. And then we would teach you sign language phrases that are applicable to your actual business area. So we work in many different sectors of the community, as you can see: healthcare, recruitment, education, hospitality. Public services is a big one that we're focusing on at the moment. So during this meeting, I'd like to be able to connect with anybody that perhaps works in public services or knows any other business clients, colleagues, friends that work in the front line, for example, ambulance, police, NHS. But yes, we do work in all those sectors. So our passion is to re-educate employers and businesses in recognising the importance and benefit of embracing your legislative obligations, that's a mouthful, to the Equality Act of 2010, really. So we like to create an inclusive community for our businesses by providing our training. So we established our freelance business in 2012. We ran it alongside a main job that I had. And then 2 years ago, we went full-time, mainly to provide more flexibility to our clients. So the last 12 months of COVID lockdown, we've adapted to online learning, so teaching like this. And that transition has been fine, and our courses have continued, and we've been really successful in providing our training in that way, and obviously being able to provide training across the country because of that. Okay, so our courses themselves, what do they include? So I guess there's three kind of strains or spheres to them, or sections: theory, the theory side, the cultural side, and the practical based topics. So on the theory side, we teach things like the types of deafness. We teach about the structure of the ear and the different assistive technology people can use. so you understand about loops and things like that in the workplace. We teach you about how to work with interpreters. You know, people assume, well, you know, I get an interpreter in for a sign language user and it's easy, but actually a lot of employers and staff don't actually know the etiquette around working with them. So, for example, one of the things that you might not know is that when you engage an interpreter to sit with you in a meeting for a sign language user, is that any background chat or whispering that you actually do, that will still be translated by the interpreter. So you have to be really careful about what you're saying to other staff, etc., in the room, because it will be translated. The other thing that people do that is often a common mistake is that when they have an interpreter in the room, they talk to the interpreter and they look at the interpreter when they're talking, rather than looking at the deaf person. So you have to look at the deaf person, which seems a bit strange at first, but that's the etiquette. That's what you need to do, because after all, you're having a conversation, an interview, etc., with that deaf person, not the interpreter. They're just there to facilitate translation and communication. So we look at Zoom accessibility and we teach you about deaf etiquette, deaf social norms and values. And that leads us to the cultural side of what we teach. So we give you that kind of background knowledge and grounding of deaf culture. And why do you need to know that? Why do your staff need to know that? Because you need to know the difference between hearing culture and deaf culture, because a lot of deaf people are entrenched in the deaf community, which has their own set of norms and values, which often are quite different to hearing norms and values. We also, as I've said before, tailor our sign language basics to each individual organisation, and we teach practical topics like meet and greet phrases, and we look at what else you might need. We talk about video relay services and how you use those and things like that. The other thing we talk about is access to work and how, as I've said before, you might feel worried about employing a deaf person because of that financial commitment. Well, the Access to Work scheme, if you don't know about it, is a grant that covers support costs for that deaf potential employee. So that includes home working as well. So that will cover things like special equipment, adaptations, support worker services like note taking, interpreters at interviews, job coaches, travel help for when we get back to face-to-face, mental health support for your deaf employee, and things like that. So reasonable adjustments that you might need to make, you can actually tap into the cost of that through Access to Work. So, for example, if it's more major adaptations like flashing lights, visual fire alarms, that's quite considerable outlay, I understand. But Access to Work can actually help to cover some of that cost. What else? Some deaf employees that are already in receipt of certain benefits like income support, incapacity benefit may not be able to access to work, but you'd need to ask that at interview stage. But one of the most important things about Access to Work is that it can provide some revenue for any deaf awareness training for your staff if you're going to think about employing a deaf person. So that's really key as well, because often employers say to me, well, you know, it's lovely and I'd love to have that accessibility training from Study Sharpe, but we can't actually afford you. But that's a way around that. So during COVID, there's additional costs for personal protection equipment, and that can be covered, especially if you're having to have a deaf employee that needs a support worker as well. And also it will cover costs like video remote relay services for interpreting, etc. So that's that. So these are some of our clients. So we've worked with some major contributors and organisations. So SENSE, which is the National Deaf Blind UK charity for deaf-blind people. We've worked with CAB, Citizens Advice. We've worked with quite a large housing association, Live West, and we're in talks at the moment with other housing associations. We've worked with Western College and other colleges and universities in Somerset. We've worked in Weston-super-Mare, North Somerset, with the museum there. We're currently working with Avon and Somerset Police, and we're hoping to work with Devon and Cornwall Police shortly, training PCSOs and neighbourhood officers in frontline communication when they deal with the public on their beat, with deaf awareness training and British Sign Language basics. So yes, so we're quite excited about different community projects that we're doing. We also work with local councils as well. So what does that mean for you, I guess? So it means that your staff, your teams, your managers, or yourselves, if you're sole business owners, have an in-depth cultural knowledge of the differences between the two cultures. You can become a deaf-friendly organisation or consultancy equipped with the right tools to demonstrate to a deaf applicant, employee, or colleague, or potential client that you're fully inclusive, that you have an understanding of what support might be available. We just talked about access to work. And that might not mean a massive or extensive financial outlay for your business. And excellent customer service to those 1 in 6 people that have a hearing loss, with really good informed staff teams or yourselves, and a tailored glossary of key British Sign Language phrases to suit your business. So just a very brief thing about me. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Deaf Studies, not death as in dying. Some people mishear me, especially on online platforms. We have a bit of a laugh, but no, it's deaf studies at Bristol University. I'm very proud of that. I did it as a mature student back in 2010. I was taught by some of the top deaf professionals in the country that are on the television at the moment, and work extensively with the UK government on various legislative movements at the moment, including Where is the Interpreter, which is where Boris, bless him, with his COVID announcements, has not had interpreters there, whereas every other country do, as well as Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, she always has interpreters, whereas Boris hasn't. So we have some members of the deaf community in Bristol that have been campaigning tirelessly to get Boris to recognise the importance of interpreters at his government announcements, and they've just won a further step in that bill. So you will see interpreters now appearing on the BBC, which is really good news. I'm a freelance deaf awareness trainer, as I said, and consultant. So I consult for various colleges, universities. I also have experience in special educational needs and used to arrange support for deaf learners in further and higher education. I used to train for the National Deaf Children's Society, train their volunteers, and that's the largest UK charity working for support of deaf young people. And of course, I couldn't teach British Sign Language without being a BSL user myself. So that's my presentation. Before I hand back to Nicole, I wanted to show you a couple of very short videos. Have I got time for that, Nicole?
Yeah, I think because we'll go on to questions after this. So yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay, go for it. Okay, so I hope you can see this. This is, so these are a couple of deaf awareness, very short sketches that I wanted to show you to illustrate really what I've been talking about. So this one is called Make Sure I Know What You Are Talking About. Okay, so that's that one. And I've got one more for you, bear with me. So this one is called Face Me When You Talk. Okay, so the very last thing I wanted to say is that, and that last one really illustrates it quite well, I think, and that is, if you are, even if you're not dealing with any potential deaf applicants, employees or clients, the one thing I'd like you to take away from my presentation is that if you do know any deaf people or anybody with a hearing loss or who lip reads, then please, please don't do one thing, and that is, in a group of you, if you're all hearing with that one person, please don't ever, when you're sharing a joke or telling a story or having a conversation, if they're missing it and they then say to you, what was that? I missed that. Please don't ever say, it doesn't matter, I'll tell you later, because that completely will destroy them and it's awful for them. So please do include them. Thank you so much.